Hello there, and welcome along to Season 3 and Episode 11 of the GardenerBen Podcast, which is brought to you in association with Peter Beals Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbealsroses.com. Christmas is just around the corner, and many of us are starting to wrap up our schedules and complete our year's work. I have just one more episode to bring you before the festive season, and the podcast will be taking a 1-week break before returning to you in early January. There's plenty of guests still to bring you for Season 3, and I'm already lining up some amazing people to talk to you in Season 4. This week I'm getting to talk to David Long, a local garden designer who I met at the Beaulieu Spring Gardeners' World Fair back in May of this year. His garden design was absolutely astonishing, and I had the privilege of not only talking to him at the show but also being allowed up onto the display to experience it firsthand. In a bid to be very sustainable and give something back to the community, David has actually reinstalled his garden installation at a local primary school, and I wanted to speak to him about his design process and how he goes about approaching a new client. As an ex-professional landscape gardener and garden maintenance contractor, my process is very, very different to David's, and I just wanted to explore these differences during our conversation. This is something that I've been covering on my YouTube, Instagram and TikTok channels this week, with hundreds of people asking me to talk my way through my processes of how I lay out a new border or approach a garden design. Now, I'm not very good at drawing, never have been, and I find it incredibly frustrating. I know many of you will say that practice makes perfect, but simply drawing things to scale isn't something that computes in my brain. And my parents to this day have a picture of a cow, or maybe a pig, I can't quite remember, on their bathroom wall that I drew when I was around 10 or 11, which is iconically having huge, great big legs and feet and a tiny body. And I suffer with the same problem when it comes to designing a garden on paper. However, I do have the ability to walk into a space and see it as a three-dimensional garden. So I find it better to go straight into the marking out process, using three-dimensional objects such as bean canes, plant pots or site pins to mark out the three-dimensional issues of a garden. For instance, the uprights of a pergola, a shed or a patio or path, for instance. This is not the normal way to design a garden, and most professional garden designers like David would go into some sort of design package or design proposal before getting this far. So I wanted to explore with him the process behind his garden design and of course his journey into horticulture. I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Today on the Ben podcast, we're actually staying really nice and local to us here in the New Forest, and I'm getting to speak to David Long from David Long Garden Designs. David, welcome along to the Ben podcast.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm exceedingly well. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Very well. Yeah.
Good, good. Now, hopefully you've managed to get some time to relax just a little bit because you've been fairly busy over recent weeks, haven't you? And that came about from when I first met you. But and well, just to do a little bit of explaining for the audience. Now, I first met you at the BBC Gardeners World Live garden event, where you had an absolutely beautiful garden installation. And you've recently moved that installation, haven't you, and installed that locally?
That's correct. Yes, it's gone into a local primary school. Actually, it's not far from you, probably a couple of miles up the road from where you are. And yeah, it went in over the summer holidays for obvious reasons, just while the children weren't in attendance. And it's been sort of reimagined for the space. But the main part of the garden is formed in there, and the children are already making good use of it.
Oh, that's really wonderful to hear. So I'm glad that's all gone well for you. So to tell the audience just a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
So yeah, I've always worked in horticulture. I studied initially up at Hartbury College when I left school, and I studied garden design and horticulture there for a few years. And I've always worked within the sort of landscape and horticulture sector. More recently, I went back to study for a year at university garden design up at the Botanic House at the University of Bristol,
Hmm.
and started up my own business sort of straight after finishing that course. So that was 3 years ago now. Yeah.
Okay, so no looking back. So when did the passion for gardening and horticulture specifically start for you? Was it at a very early age, or it was maybe after GCSEs or something?
Very early. I've always been sort of active, and from a very early age, I was working with my parents and my grandparents. My parents have they used to have a dairy business, so it was
Okay.
very much a family business and very hands-on, early starting, and working before school, and yeah, and my on my sort of mother's side of the family, they were always sort of working in land management and sort of gardens and sort of countryside management. So I've sort of worked sort of with them with bits and pieces. So I suppose it was always the hard work sort of ethic was sort of brought on me from an early age, but the love of the outdoors is really just obviously spending lots of time outdoors, and it sort of naturally grew anyway. And it's something that my father sort of said to me quite early, with him being the oldest of four siblings. He had very much had to take the helm with the dairy business, which in the 80s was hard work because of the supermarkets.
Hmm.
And so
I
he
mean,
just said, just find something you love and go for it, so that's what I did. Yeah.
oh, lovely. And can you remember a specific time or thing when it was for maybe it was a gift that you were given that really sort of sparked that journey into gardening? I mean, for me, I talk quite often on the podcast about getting tons of rockery stone for birthday presents, and I got a greenhouse one year for a birthday present and a pond for a Christmas present. Can you remember something your parents may have maybe given you, or a family member maybe given you to really sort of spark you along on your journey?
It's it almost sounds like child labour, but my it was actually my great grandfather. His garden was the one I remember working a lot in when I was younger, and he snapped a hoe and he basically cut the handle down and sort of sanded the top of it and passed it to me. And it
Oh,
was one of those. I was like, okay, it's my first present, and off I go. I was sort of picking up stones and working through the beds, and he was sort of guiding me, what was a weed, what wasn't, and yeah, I mean, his garden was very much. It was very much grown for the house for produce. So it was
yes.
most of the garden was laid to a vegetable gardens, and he grew a lot of dahlias.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it was. I suppose as present wise, that was probably the first one that sticks in my mind. Although there's been a lot since. The that would be the first one, and the one that sort of stands out. Yeah.
Oh, it's really interesting to hear. I mean, the more and more people that I talk to about their journey towards the horticulture industry and where their passion ignited from it, often does um, involve a grandparent or maybe a special auntie or uncle, or certainly someone of an older generation that sort of imparted and gave them a little bit of space just to find that passion. I was actually talking to Philip Harkness from Harkness Roses just a couple of
Yeah.
days ago about his journey into it, and obviously his family of five generations into the business. But yeah, for him it was very similar. It started very young with someone just sort of feeding the little imagination, just like your grandfather giving you that broken hoe and sort of repurposing it for you. It seems to follow sort of a repeat pattern. There's always someone that sort of just gives that little fire, just a little bit of kindling, and off the passion ignites.
That's right. It's usually, like I say, it's usually a grandparent, isn't it? And
Yes, yeah.
we both of my grandparents, they both had allotments, so they're of a time where they were very much thinking about productive spaces, as well. So that was um, that was always part of it, is working through the vegetable patch and pruning trees, and yeah. So it was my grandfather's garden was more more ornamental, so that was the first sort of taste of sort of a quintessentially sort of cottage garden, which
Yep.
I don't know if you're aware, but the year before the show last year, I did a small what they call beautiful border, which is like a mini uh, show garden. Like, it's a really good stepping stone into doing sort of show gardens that the Gardeners World offer, and that's open to anyone. You don't have to be a professional gardener or designer. It could be horticultural societies, or I mean, yes, last year they had a father and son team that did a space as well. So my first one was actually based on although it was called my grandfather's garden, it was actually based on my great grandfather.
Okay.
So they actually he worked for the Duke up at the on the Badminton estate, where actually the new RHS show, which is it's not replacing, but they're spending alternate years now at Hampton Court, and then taking a year away from it, and they're actually taking it up to Badminton House, where my great grandfather used to work for the old Duke. And when he passed, they named his cottage after him as well. So that garden sort of stays there, although it's very different now. But yeah, it's a nice sort of memory, sort of going back up there, and hopefully I'll be helping a friend of mine who I studied with. He's going to be entering a show garden for next year up at RHS Badminton. So I'll be literally going down memory lane as we approach the estate, going past the cottage, and I'm helping him with that. So that's going to be a really special time for me. Yeah, I really enjoy that.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you for sharing that with me. It's I was just about to ask about your journey towards BBC Gardeners World and the live show there, and it's really interesting that you mentioned about the Beautiful Borders competition, because that's where an awful lot of social media content creators start their journey into professional horticultural sort of trades, and also where an awful lot of people that are just starting out in their garden design businesses or their garden maintenance businesses, where they'll start and cut their teeth. So the Beautiful Borders came first, and then obviously you moved on to a fully blown show garden. Now, I've seen that in person. You and I had a really lovely chat. Actually, stood within that space. Tell me a little bit about, because we're all very different. For me, I'm always been very plant led. Although I can do construction and building and hard landscaping, it doesn't really spark imagination and joy in myself. It's always been plants. So can you talk us a little bit through your design process as you approached the space that you created there? Where did the idea come from?
So similarly to the beautiful border that I did the previous year, I always think that it's always, for me anyway, it's best to do something that's sort of close to home, a sort of personal journey. That's what you can obviously relate the most to. And
Yes, yeah.
so yeah, it was more about a space where, for me, sort of jumping into where previously I've sort of managed gardens. I've always been sort of working as a team. Going back to uni and starting as a garden designer, I very much felt like, although I had the qualifications and the experience, it was very much like, there's your qualification, you're a garden designer now. And I felt like a bit of an imposter. And the first sort of few months, it took a lot of sort of conditioning to think, right, okay, get out there and sort of sell yourself, which I've never really had to do before.
No, I think that's
So
it is really difficult to do. I think again I can really identify with the imposter syndrome, because again I walk into a space and people expect me to command and be confident in what I do as a content creator, and realistically, I mean, I'm a gardener. I mean, I just happen to have ended up with a fairly large social media footprint, and doing that in public is really is gut-wrenchingly hideous. I mean, it's horrible. So it's really nice. It's not nice to hear, but it's very relatable to hear that you have that feeling of sort of needing to sort of make yourself known in that space and sort of feel comfortable in that space, and you maybe felt like you shouldn't have been there.
yeah, that's it. I mean, it was one of those things that I thought, how can I portray that feeling?
Hmm.
And so to say, my first few client meetings, I was, sat in the car beforehand, nervous, sort of shaking. It's like, right, okay. So, but, it was one of those moments where you need to just take a breath and go, right, okay, let's do this. Jump on out and put your best foot forward. And the garden was very much about that. It's like for obviously people that have seen it, they'll know. But the essentially the front of the garden was a huge wooden archway with sort of 18 sort of fingers sort of enclosing on the space to give you a sense of sort of enclosure and suppression, and a structure that was quite daunting, I think, quite angular.
Hmm.
And so it's really just to think, okay, that looks really intimidating, but the journey through it led to what I think was a nice space. And it was almost to say, take that leap of faith, because you can reap the rewards afterwards, and you can, it leads to a better place, and you can enjoy that journey. So that's really what the garden was about. It was about, like I say, a personal journey for myself, and just taking those nerves and that sort of imposter syndrome to just go, right, back yourself and put yourself out there and go for it. So yeah, and similarly to today, Ben, like you said about it's this is not something I've done much of before. So yeah, it's I'm actually starting to do some talks as well, some public speaking, which again is completely out of my comfort zone,
Mine too, yeah.
and hugely nerve-wracking. But it's all stemmed from really the journey that I've gone on as a designer, and the process of the show garden, and the thought and the meaning behind the theatre of greens. Yeah.
Brilliant. So very much that in your personal and professional life, that stage that you created last year at BBC Gardeners World, that's really sort of springing you forward into a different era of your career.
Most definitely. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's
Yeah.
really nice to hear.
Yeah. And again, it's living on. It's going to be, and already is. It's helping children to take their leap of faith, whatever that may be. Some are, a natural performers. Others a bit more, quieter, and they might want to keep themselves to themselves. But just seeing other students perform and have the courage to jump up on stage might inspire them. So yeah, there's it's all sorts going on. There's a fashion show. They're doing poetry recitals. There's performing arts that they're doing on the stage now. So I mean, for me, it's great that the gardens, continuing to inspire and getting used daily. They're having their outdoor assemblies on it as well. It's a really active space, which fills me with a lot of joy.
I was
And I
just
get
going
to
to say,
see it as well. I drive past. I drive through Bremer quite a lot, down through into the New Forest where a lot of my clients are based, and I get a glimpse of it every time I go past the school. So it's lovely.
oh, wonderful. I will have to make the. I mean, I confess I don't get to leave the house very often, but I should have to make the journey up. It's only, I say, a couple of miles from me. I have to journey up and just have a look at it, because that's really lovely. It must bring you, I say, as you already mentioned, a huge amount of joy to see that being used so well. But how did it end up there? I must admit that, but it seems to me a little bit of a strange conversation. You sort of picking up the phone to a local school and saying, "Well, I've got this garden installation. Would you like me to install it in a space for you?" I mean, that's got a peculiar conversation to have with someone, surely.
It came about uh, off the back of where the garden had planned to go into the hospital space. I was in conversations with uh, the estate manager there, who looks after the sort of municipal spots within around the hospital, and it was one of those that they were concerned about the ongoing, because ideally I wanted to keep the garden as a whole,
Yes.
um, and obviously relocating that's fine. But their main concern was, as you well know, looking after gardens, is the ongoing maintenance of it, and it is quite essentially it would have been reimagined into a larger space, because you think for a show garden everything's quite condensed. The
Yes. Yeah.
plants are almost rubbing up against each other, sort of working and dancing together quite closely, whereas in a normal setting, if you were planting them out into a border, you're thinking about optimum sizes, so it would spread out to be quite a big space. And their concern was the the ongoing costs of maintaining this space, which I completely understand. So I had the confirmation I think it was on a Friday afternoon, saying that they're going to back out from thank you, but we'll have to pass on this opportunity. And I usually do the Tesco shop, the weekly shop, on a Saturday, and I saw the three bins where you put the coins in, the blue coins, and
Okay.
one
Yeah.
of which was the Bremer Primary School garden project. So I got in contact with the headmistress there, and yeah, laid out to say whether you'd like to. It was the week before the show as well, so they
Oh,
left it
okay.
until
Yeah.
it left it until the last minute. And so it was all a bit. My goodness, I've got this garden. I want it to, for sustainability, but also legacy. I'd like it to live. I'd like to be relocated. And yeah, so I got in contact, and I offered the tickets. They came down and saw the garden at the show. I think there's about 4 staff that came down, and we had a chat about it all. And yeah, I spoke to them about, it's not what we do is repurpose the garden, so essentially spin the stage round so it's facing forward, so the archway is very much a backdrop to the stage,
Yes.
and make it work for their space and their needs. So the plants have all gone on to various other projects and sort of donated to other projects. So yeah, it was but the main body of the garden, the main structure of it, is yeah, has been reconfigured for the school for their outdoor theatre.
Wonderful. That sounds like it came through in a really nice organic way, and the pieces fell into place nicely at the right time for you. It's funny.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
funny.
it did.
Something I can relate to on a stranger scale. Obviously, I'm known for reviewing roses and dahlias and peonies, which is a wonderful problem to have. But quite often, I'm left with quite literally dozens and dozens and dozens of plants, which I simply don't have room for. So over recent months, I've been reaching out to local organisations, and I'm finding it very, very hard to donate things to people. I reached out to the local church here in Fordingbridge, thinking that again, that I might be able to create a rose garden to bring people sort of joy and happiness and tranquility in a public space. And again, the concern with that was how will it be maintained? And I've offered to maintain it. I reached out to Salisbury Cathedral, thinking, oh, okay, big. That's one of the largest sort of land estates around a cathedral within the country. They might have just a small corner where I can sort of donate, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60 plants and plant a rose garden because there's lots of roses around. But again, the answer there was no. And I'm sort of a little bit stuck. So if anybody does know of anybody that needs some roses donated, because I've probably got about 50 or 60 this year that I would like
Oh
to
wow.
move somewhere else. Not a small amount financially. I mean, they're considerably valuable, but
Yeah, yeah.
I've stock that I simply, I've worked with, and I simply cannot house. I mean, I shuffle my collection around here in the garden and move things in and out as I need to continue to work with them. But after having a rose for about 12 to 18 months, sometimes it is necessary for it to move somewhere else. And I didn't really want to put them on FaceBay, and that sounds silly, but I thought, well, I don't really want to sell them on. I'd quite like to, again, for legacy and for a little bit of, I suppose, notoriety, I suppose, with myself, and I'd like to give a little bit back and to create a space somewhere that I'm finding it difficult to find a home for. So if I'll ask you and put it out to the audience, if anybody does know anybody locally that could do with some roses, to let me know, because I'm sort of shuffling them about here, not knowing what to do with them.
Well, I'd love to take a few off your hands, but I think my wife might have something to say about it if I start bringing more plants home and
Uh,
eating a bit more into the lawn, and then the children will be on my back as well because I'm
yeah.
reducing their lawn space. So, but
the
yeah,
lawn the lawn is
yeah,
the lawn is evaporating here too at a vast rate of knots.
yeah.
So yeah, I
Well, I'll
suppose
have a
it's
think as well. I'll
uh,
see if there's anyone locally that's, any projects. I think schools are always a good one to try and get the next generation enthused about horticulture. So,
they are,
it's,
but roses and schools don't
yes, I
really
know.
go very well with each other.
Yeah, well, they'll learn, won't they? It's a harsh lesson, but it's
Again,
you only find that out once.
I had this conversation with Philip Harkness, is exactly the same thing, and he said exactly the same thing. They'll do it once, and maybe do it twice, and then secondly, third time round, they won't do it at all. But again, it's a it's a little bit of a health and safety issue. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe the school thing wouldn't be a good idea for my collection. So tell me a little bit about your process. Now, for me, when I get called to garden, which and to design a space, I can't draw whatsoever. I cannot put pen to paper or pencil to paper. My scale work is just dreadful, and I have tried doing it with paper, and it doesn't really work for me. But can you tell us or tell the audience just a little bit how you go about designing a space? How you come up with the concepts or feel of a space when you first walk into it and when you first meet a client?
I mean, for me, yeah, it's all about the client brief and working it into that space sympathetically. I think, working with the surroundings, you get a feel straight away as soon as you walk through the front door. You get an idea of how they start the house and the kind of sort of style from the architecture and the surrounding landscape, whether that's on a very shoulder to shoulder new build estate or somewhere with a bit more space. So for me, it's all about the client's needs and meeting their needs. I'm not someone where, oh, this is a David long garden and you have that in your space and you're lucky to have that. It's, for me, it's a collaborative relationship. It's all about meeting their brief and making it sit sympathetically within the space and using materials and plants that are going to sort of work hard for them.
And I think
That's
over my career, which is physically coming to an end, I'm moving direction into different parts of the horticulture industry now. But I never really, it was always very challenging to have those conversations with clients that simply wanted to do something that was either not going to sit well with the build, the surrounding building, or sit well with the environmental factors that were in place, or sometimes just create a maintenance nightmare. Or moving forward, you look at something and a customer gives you and floats you an idea and says, "Oh, I'd like to do X, Y, and Z," and you look at it and think, that's just going to be absolutely horrendous to maintain moving forward 365 days a year. That conversation for me was always really, really uncomfortable. Have you felt uncomfortable in doing that with clients? Have you had to have that conversation with them in the past?
Yes, I think what it seems to be for me a lot of the time, usually on the list is low maintenance. They want a
Yep.
lower maintenance garden. So again, it's making sure, and that's where it really is a balancing act, because the last thing I want to do is put a big patio down, a big lawn, and a few borders around the outside. I want to bring the garden towards the house and really sort of create spaces within it. But with that, you need to have your void and mass, so your open spaces and your planting. And really, it's about plant selection. It's more
Hmm.
about the plants are going to work hard for you, that aren't going to demand too much of your time. So really, it comes down to that. So yeah, for me, it's I think it's, as an industry, I think sometimes that's missed, and I think there should be more of an emphasis on it, because you could easily go out and do these huge sweeping borders with filled full of plants, but the owners are very much like, we haven't got the time to look after it. We're not gardeners. We just want a garden that looks lovely,
Hmm.
and we don't want to spend hundreds of pounds a month maintaining it. So it's really, that's something that I think as an industry sometimes it's overlooked. Where one of my early conversations is, okay, how much do you garden? Do you interested in it, and would you be
And how
interested
much
in
you how
employing
much
someone
yeah,
to help you with the garden? How frequent would that be? What kind of budget would? Because it is important. The last thing
of
you want to
course,
do
yeah.
is give them a space, which yeah is great, but rather than sitting out on an evening enjoying it with a glass of wine, they're looking at it thinking, oh my goodness, look at all the work we need to, they become a slave to it, which doesn't help anyone. So
No, no.
I think the maintenance requirements is hugely important to a space. But I'm finding it more and more that most people are thinking towards lower maintenance plants that are going to work hard, and yeah, so they can enjoy the space rather than work too much within it.
Of course, and I think so many people have become preconditioned that low maintenance tends to mean evergreen, and for me, that just the two are very very different. And just because a plant is evergreen, it doesn't mean it's necessarily low maintenance. Actually, I quite often find the evergreen varieties that shed leaves, for instance, when you don't expect them to in sort of March and April, and create a huge amount of mess in March and April when everything else is just sort of waking up. I find those a little bit more high maintenance. I know I'm going back decades now, but yeah, we cast our mind back to sort of the Alan Titchmarsh and Charlie Dimmock era, where we were sort of
Yeah,
changing rooms and changing gardens very quickly, ground force way, and planting formiums everywhere. Well, yeah, they are low maintenance for a certain point in time, and then they create a huge maintenance problems because you need to strip them out. So you might not to need to do anything to them on a sort of a weekly basis, but maybe every 18 months you need to spend 3 or 4 hours sort of underneath of them stripping out dead leaves. So it's again, I think good point you've made there, to by saying actually it's down to the planting and how much time the customer has to actually allocate to maintain a space. I think it's something that obviously sometimes gets really overlooked, and you end up. People often think by saying I want something that's fairly low maintenance, they just end up with a patio with a sea of gravel, and that's not particularly, in my opinion, aesthetically
not a
pleasing. It's
garden.
no, and it's not a garden. It's an outdoor space. And again, this thing that people have seemed to have said, that actually their gardens have become extensions of their homes rather than being gardens, and they expect them
Yeah.
to be tidy and clean. And again, it offers huge amounts of problems for me as a horticulturalist, because unfortunately, nature gardens, they're not clean and sterile, and they're not tidy a lot of the time.
That's a living entity, isn't it? It's the thing with
Indeed.
the some of the clinical porcelain tiles. I mean, I prefer natural stone, but you see, with the clean look at, the seamless look from inside to out, where they're trying to mimic the same sort of paving material, and it's not, it's not easily transferable. You do get a variation in tone and obviously the weather, and it's always gonna look slightly different, but you've got that maintenance side of it as well. So again, it's going to give you more to do if you want that clinical look.
Yeah.
You'll be jet washing it 2 or 3 times a year.
Well,
So
yeah, I'm looking out at my sandstone paving now that's out there. And I'm thinking, oh, actually, a lot of people wouldn't think to do that, but I normally do give it a bit of a jet wash just as the weather starts to turn. And a lot of people say, well, that's a bit crazy. Why do you do that, Ben? It'll be filthy again by March. You think, well, actually, just really lifts the space. I mean, it's something about sort of jet washing the paving. I've got a fossil paving with some really lovely fossilized plants in it, and just by lifting it and just bringing the color up by a couple of notches means that actually through the cold and the wet winter months it actually just really glows. And oh yeah, I'll need to get out there again in February, March, do it again, but it's so nice to lift that space and make it look nice and bright, moving towards as the sort of light levels drop. It just means it just looks a little bit more loved for me, a little bit more crisp.
oh, definitely, yeah. Like you say, especially going into the colder, dark sort of winter months, having that cleaned up and getting a reflective light back into the space, it's definitely gonna lift it a bit. And obviously, it's not as much of a job to do in the March, is it? Because you've already had a sort of session on it. So yeah,
Yeah, stop it getting too.
worth doing, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we talked about earlier about your journey towards your current career. Can you give? I spoke to a very young gentleman. I say young gentleman, a guy called Ethan, who's actually a soil scientist and botanist, and his journey into horticulture was really most interesting. And he, very young in his mid-20s now. But I asked him to give a few tips and pointers to people that were thinking about a career in the horticulture industry. Can you impart any knowledge or any expertise there about how you can encourage people to come into the trade? Because I think it's one of the largest problems that the horticultural trade as a general rule faces moving forward, that there seems to be a lack of young people coming towards the industry, and it's been happening for decades and decades. Even certainly when I did my formal training at Sparshall all those years ago, there was a huge massive turn down in numbers of people
Yeah.
entering what they class as a vocational course, a practical career. Um, and there's still a little bit of, I think, a negative stigma surrounding those of us that choose to do a vocational course or a practical career. And this thing that actually it leaves you being less than anything. But can you give any sort of advice to people thinking, maybe they've got a teenager at home that maybe doesn't quite know what to do, that but has an interest in being outside? Any pointers to coming toward the horticultural career?
It's tricky. I mean, for me, it was always sort of brought up in that hard sort of working environment when from a very young age. So I was already in that space, and I think it's just great for welfare, especially in this day and age with everything in front of you and so many systems to simplify life or make life easier for you. I think, and having all the pressures of social media, I think having that space where you're not on you're not on your phone in your face. You're very much in that space with nature, and I think it's you're working hard. You're part of sort of a developing landscape, and you be creative with it. I think it's just really good for welfare and well-being. And there's lots of different avenues you can go down. I'm sure some of your guests would have mentioned this before, but I mean, it's not just sort of there's slogging through borders and weeding beds. There's a lot more to it. There's creating new spaces, breathing new life into spaces, redeveloping gardens and the broader landscape. So it's an active job, but it's great. I mean, I don't know how else to sort of to sell it to the younger generation. It's really hard. Like I say, it's really hard in this day and age. But it's with phones and everything that seems to be in your palm. But it's yes, it is hard work. It's strenuous, but you feel the endorphins run right, and you feel great for doing it. You get
Yeah.
a lot of feedback from it, and the benefits of being outside and active. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point you bringing up about being connected, and that device that's often in everybody's hands all the time, connecting everybody to everything all the time. And for a professional gardener like myself who's slightly moved away from the tools into content creation, it for me sometimes is very frustrating that I'm used to looking at the world through my own eyes and looking at the beauty of something that I might be talking about, and then adding just a phone in front of that sometimes feels like a real physical block. And when people see me create content, they often think that I'm very Billy Basic, and I suppose I am very basic in my setup. There's very little. fuss and very little equipment that I use. It's literally a set of earbuds, a tripod, on my phone normally. Because I find the more stages I put in front of me and whatever it is that I'm talking about, whether it's a how-to tutorial or whether it's a review of something, or whether it's just me simply filming a clips to create a reel or a short, that actually the more stages I put in front of it and the more complicated it becomes, the less I'm actually engaged with the subject matter. I like to still be very much involved and touching and feeling and still enjoying the process of what I'm sharing. And I really hope that sort of comes through in the media. And I quite often say to people, I
It
get
does.
thank you. I do get loads of messages from people. So how have you made your journey? How have you ended up here, and how have you ended up, at the position where your physical career is now not at an end, but is now very much in the background of your content creation? And I said, well, just do you share what is important to you, share it through as close to your eyes as at all possible, and remain as true to your style as you can possible, and don't get sort of bogged down and weighed down in the fact that other people expect you to have a rolling banner or twinky tonky music or special effects on the screen. Because for me that doesn't change the content. For me, that all that does is make it look more valuable, but actually the content for me is what comes out of my mouth. It's the
What you're
30
saying. Yeah,
exactly,
that knowledge.
it's the 35 years worth of information I don't quite know what to do with, because myself and my husband, we haven't had children, and I'm just a bit sort of not concerned, but I have it in the back of my head. Where is my legacy? Where is my future? What am I leaving behind for people to notice? I think when I planted the garden here at North Lodge, I think that was something that was very, very much in the forefront of my mind, that I actually thought, well, okay, well, I've created hundreds of spaces all over the area that I work in. How many of those will survive? But the garden here at North Lodge is my song. I think, and I'm planting sort of. I'm looking out the windows now at the birch trees that I planted 5 years ago that are now heading on for 20 feet tall, and the bleached limes that I put in and then bleached myself into this beautiful screen. I'm looking at those with the stems now. Sort of, I can't get both hands around them because they're now so big, and that really excites me that I've had the time in a space to actually sort of put down roots and create a garden and create a space that, I mean, the likelihood is it won't. The next people that inherit this house, whenever that happens, they will change it massively. But this has been an expression of me, culminating all of those skills together over my very long career, and pouring them into this space.
Yeah, I just one of those I'd love to come and visit. And I was just going to say also, just going back slightly with the content you create, there's value there, and it doesn't need to be all singing or dancing. You're imparting good knowledge with processes and the plant focuses. I think it's great, and it's always one of those things where you say just keep it simple, and that's all you need. You don't need to overcomplicate the process, so
Yeah.
you're getting your message across, and it's in a really natural and genuine way. So yeah, I think it's
Oh,
great.
thank you. I'm always trying to actively encourage people to give it a go. And just because I say doing it in one way is important, I mean, obviously, I'm building with a huge amount of decades worth of experience, but that doesn't mean necessarily to mean that it's fully correct, and it's not correct for this moment in time. The world is changing, the climate is changing, and we have to adapt what we do every single year. I am tweaking things, and I say to people, make sure you take loads of pictures. Make sure you take loads of notes, whether that's in a notebook or whether that's in the device that's in your hand, and make physical notes or photographic notes. And if you have to, if you think, actually, this year my sweet peas were a little bit of a disaster, I autumn sowed them and that didn't really work for me. So next year I'm going to go back to doing what does work for me, and that's a spring sowing. I get my plants moving quicker. There's no sort of stop start. They get them in at the right time and they sort of motor on towards flowering. I found the autumn sowing was a bit clunky for that. And I just say to people, just give it a go. And if it goes slightly wrong, don't think that you failed. Don't think it was a complete disaster, but actually look at it and go, right, okay, next year's another season. I get to give it another go. What can I do slightly differently? How can I tweak the process? And then, as long as you're sort of keeping notes and sort of making it come from an educated point of view, as in you've learned from the mistake, I think it's a really, really important thing to try and give to people, because I think sometimes I've spoken to a lady called Katrina up in Scotland, and her son has lives with autism, and she's his full-time carer, and she has to sort of condition him quite a lot, because the failures of horticulture he's growing as part of his curriculum at home, and that really does knock him. And she's trying to has to sort of move his attention away from the possible failures. But I think it's quite important in that, normal society, with a normal person that wasn't suffering with autism, that actually you do need to sort of just look, okay, well, this year I grew one pumpkin, and last year I had 15 pumpkins, and you have to sort of get used to the fact that the weather threw you a curveball. Next year you need to give it a go. It doesn't mean it was a complete failure and a write-off. It just means that you just need to do something ever so slightly different.
That's right. I mean, it's yeah, as you say, the climate is changing, and the last few years have been sort of very different with sort of long summers and wet winters. So it really does sort of keep you on your toes. It keeps you guessing. So it's I mean, it's exciting in that respect, but yeah, it can be frustrating. There will be failures. There's no matter how much you learn, there'll always be things that will keep you on your toes. So I think keep having those records and something to refer back to, and the processes and plants that know that work for you, then it's great. But it's always a constant learning process. Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I love about horticulture. It's the world's changing, the climate's changing, so it's never really static. The garden itself is a living entity. It's always moving on and developing. So yeah, it really it keeps you busy and engaged.
Yeah. David, what's next for you? What does the season of 2026 have in store for you?
2026. Well, I've already got some design projects sort of signed on for next year, which is
Hmm.
great because starting out with design, you're always thinking about okay the next one and where the works when it's coming in. So that's this really great news that I've already started to book stuff in for next year.
Yeah.
They're all local. Like I say, most of my work is quite local. I very much target my marketing within sort of an hour radius of where I am in Downton, just south of Salisbury.
See,
And
we're very lucky with where we live, aren't we? Because geographically, it's explained to the audience. We're right next to the New Forest. We're right next to the South Downs, on the tri-county border. So you've got Dorset, Hampshire, and Wiltshire all coming together,
yeah,
and
that's
that brings you in within reach of the Jurassic Coast and Bournemouth and Poole, with its very sort of subtropical climate with salt winds and free draining soils. But then moving more inland towards sort of Lymington and the New Forest, you've then got a very peaty soil, much colder. So you've got a multitude of different spaces that you can work on.
yeah. So we've got one that's just down the road in Hell that's going to be a new build project. So we're doing the landscape plan and obviously the garden build for that. That's about an acre. That's a really exciting project. And then I'm actually doing a roof terrace in a property in an old house in Lyndhurst, which has been sort of separated up into 6 different apartments. And
Wonderful. So,
so that's something I've never done a roof terrace before. So I'm very excited about that. It's a very
well,
small space, but I'm hugely excited about getting involved with that one.
I've done plenty of those in my time. I don't envy you because they are incredibly
Oh yeah,
rewarding, but very complicated.
yeah, yeah,
Gardening from the inside of someone's house when you can't just walk through a gate, for instance, with a wheelbarrow, um,
yes.
adds a whole and often these spaces. I'm not gonna terrify you, but often cream carpets and very light finishes and
Yeah,
yeah.
narrow corridors to get up to. Yeah, the stairwell is. So you could see straight away as soon as we had the initial site visit, logistically and
I
practically
once,
getting
I
things up
once,
there. It's going to
I
be.
once had to take a very large ancient olive, which weighed approximately about 600 kilos, through someone's house. That was because I failed to do my site appraisal properly, and I thought it was going to pass down the side of a house, and that involved taking about 15 decorative lights off the wall. So we chose to take it through someone's foyer, and that one in itself was, yeah, not fun at all.
Yeah, you can't get that one wrong, can you? It could cause quite a bit of damage. Yeah, that's we've got similar things to sort of contend with the roof terrace. It's very sort of narrow corridors and stairwells to get things up. So with that, you've got your design limitations. You've got to think about materials that are going to work to get up, well, just to get up into the space. So
Yes, yeah.
it's yeah. So there's I'm really looking forward to that one. Like I say, I've not done a roof garden before, so it'd be a new challenge and in a lovely setting as well in Lyndhurst. So yeah,
Wonderful, and then of course you're doing the show, the RHS show with your friend in Badminton.
yes, yeah. Again, really looking forward to that. A trip down memory lane. It's one I've helped other designers previously at shows, RHS sort of Chelsea shows and Malvern, the Gardener's World show at Bewley is one I've obviously it's very local to me, and it's a show that's it's done very quickly. You have essentially 3.5 days to build it, and then the show's on for 3 days after that. So the RHS shows, as you know, they're weeks of planning and then weeks of installation. So
Yeah.
to help out Henry, who's based in Bristol, he's I'm really looking forward to lending him a hand and getting involved in that show. We'll be in a small part of a big team, but yeah, just being part of that process would be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Wonderful. And just on that note, you said you had 3 days to build the installation over at Bewley. How long, interestingly, how long did you have to take it down again?
You have essentially a day to take it down. So yeah, so you get so the show closes 5 o'clock on the Sunday. It runs Friday to Sunday. So at 5 o'clock on Sunday, everyone's lining up to come into, and that's the same with all the trade stands. Everything, there's a huge queue in the car park. As soon as that gate shuts and the last visitors have left the showground, it's full hands to the pub. Everyone's just going at it to try and get their installations down. I took out a lot of the plants on the Sunday evening, and then I did the breakdown on the Monday. But that's where for me it's a positive, and it works against you as well. It's one of those where the show, for me, having a young family, it obviously requires a lot of time building these show gardens. So the Gardener's Wheel one works really well in the fact that it's 3.5 days to build. So you get up until the sort of midday on the Thursday. You start on the Monday, midday Thursday, you finish the build, and it's ready for judging on the Thursday afternoon. And then the Friday, the show opens. So it's really neat that it's up and down sort of so quick. But with that, it's it's a lot of work in a short space of time. You don't have the luxury of weeks of build. You've got to really make sure you've got your ducks in a row, both with the materials, and that does sway the design. You've got to think about, okay, I've got to build something and it's got to be up. Really, the hard landscape build has to be up in the first day, because the rest of it, you're bringing the soil, you're bringing the plants in, and that takes time. So it does really impact the design. You've got to think about that from the early stages. And
And I hate to be the sort of the negative spin on it, but hearing about the fact that you have so little time to take something down, because I've heard this even at Chelsea and Hampton Court, that there is a very, very similar story. It's a little bit disappointing, realistically, that you're not given a little bit more time by the organisers to get these things down, because from a sustainable point of view, that if you were given just maybe 2 days rather than just one day to take it down, so much more of what you were stripping could actually be taken apart properly, wouldn't have to be broken. You could do with, I'm not saying with yourself, but could be taken apart with more care and attention, or you have the time to move it rather than throw it away. Surely that, hopefully moving forward, might be something that can happen with these shows to make them more sustainable, to give you more time to sort of strip out and salvage stuff rather than making it disposable and just heading off for compost or landfill.
Goodness, yeah. I mean, I think that's a huge part of what the show should be about. And I know especially with the RHS shows, there's a sort of vigorous process where you have to go through to make sure you show exactly where everything's going and where where it's going to be, sort of where it's going to end up and rebuilt. So for me anyway, personally, that was something that had to happen. I wanted to make sure all the plants and the garden would had a forever home. And you're right, though, it is one of those processes where, albeit I didn't, that was one of the parts that I maybe should have had an extra pair of hands to help me. It was the Monday was a lot of hard work, and you want to, knowing that it's going somewhere else, I wanted to make sure I took the time to take it down properly, and it could be reused. And I think with all the shows, there needs to be more of an emphasis on the sustainability and the relocation of these show gardens, because they are showpieces, but at the same time they need to have somewhere where they can finish up, and for the public and to see sort of longer term. And I think that is maybe not overlooked as such, but it's a box ticking thing. But it's the follow up. I think seeing those spaces being recreated, and so I think that needs to be looked at a bit.
Yeah.
a bit more detail. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I hate to be negative, but that's just a cynic in me
No,
because
it's
I,
important. No, no, definitely. No, I believe me, I'd liked a lot more time
I
to take it down. That's for sure.
can
I
imagine.
think a lot of the others, gardeners and designers that had show gardens there, they would have, they'd have liked a bit more time. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. Where can everybody find you if they want to, if they've enjoyed listening to the conversation in your processes today? Where can everybody find you?
So it's simply David Long Garden Design. That's on Facebook, and then there's David Long Gardens on Instagram.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, just Google David Long Garden Design. We're based, like I say, just to the south of Salisbury on the edge of the New Forest. And as I said before, I cover probably about an hour. So as you rightly mentioned, Poole, Bournemouth, Winchester, sort of all that sort of radius from the office, really. So yeah, anyone that wants to get in touch, that's my contact details. And hopefully you can find me on social media and through Google search, and we can have an initial conversation. That'd be great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for talking to me today. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you. And I'm planning to attend the show in Badminton, so hopefully I might get to bump into you during the summer as well.
Wonderful. That's been a pleasure. Thank you for the call. Thanks,
All
Ben.
right. All right then, David. Take good care now. Bye bye.
All the best. Cheers.
I wanted to personally thank David for being so generous with his time and once again joining me on the GardenerBen podcast. Getting to know him at the Gardeners World Spring Fair was a real pleasure, and if I ever get the time, I would like to make my way down to see the garden reinstalled at the local primary school, which is just a mile or two from my home here in the New Forest. It is wonderful to know that this beautiful garden is now being used by many children on a daily basis, and I hope they enjoy it for many, many years to come. As I mentioned earlier, the GardenerBen podcast is going to take a small break over the Christmas period, and you won't be receiving an episode on Monday the 29th of January. Instead, the podcast will be back early in the new year with a new episode on the 5th of January. And the podcast will be heading to Ireland, where I get to speak to Conrad, known on Instagram as That Botanic Guy. The podcast is brought to you in association with Peterbilt's Roses, winner of 30 Chelsea Gold medals and creating timeless roses since 1968. Go online and shop at www.peterbilsroses.com and make sure that you're following along on Instagram and TikTok. I hope that you have a wonderful festive season and a happy and safe new year. I'll see you again on the 5th of January. Until then, happy gardening.